The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. Those were the words of American author Howard Phillips Lovecraft. He was born on Rhode Island in 1890 to a wealthy family who later lost their wealth as he came of age. This left him with the issue of having to earn money for himself. He was from an early age encouraged to appreciate literature, especially classical literature and poetry. He was partly educated by a local businessman, Van Buren Phillips, who taught him not just the classics, but also weirder tales of horror. He has recounted having nightmares from the age of 5, specifically about beings he termed night gaunts. He would also later include these in his stories, and nightmares became somewhat of a common theme in his writing. The First World War was also a big factor in gaining his signature style. It had accustomed people with the biggest terrors of their lifetime, and fantastical folklore wasn't as frightening anymore. Lovecraft would invent a new genre of horror writing, cosmic horror, which emphasizes the insignificance of humankind in the cold and fundamentally alien universe. According to Lovecraft, humanity is but a tiny ignorant substance in space, and there is a myriad of other beings far more powerful and ancient. To him, humans were not worthy to be the center of attention. His stories include the uncoverings of secret communities and cult-like ritualistic gatherings, usually described as consisting of beings malformed or fish-like in appearance, who worship strange deities, one of these being the popular cosmic celestial entity known as Cthulhu. The protagonists in his works are usually of curious nature: explorers, investigators, researchers, and antiquarians. There's the same fictional continuity in his stories, with recurring characters, locations, and mythologies. His most famous works include The Call of Cthulhu, The Rats in the Walls, At the Mountains of Madness, and The Shadow over Innsmouth. The Rats in the Walls put Stellapor, the last descendant of his family, in the situation of inheriting his ancestral estate. And after moving back in and hearing rats scurrying behind the walls, he finds that his family had raised human cattle underground for generations to satisfy their taste for human flesh. Succumbing to madness in the end, he would still hear rats in the walls. At the Mountains of Madness is about a disastrous expedition to the Antarctic continent and what was found there by university researchers. The focus of the main protagonist is to prevent others from going back in fear of what would happen if the truth was exposed. The Shadow over Innsmouth details the story of a student conducting an antiquarian tour of New England, in which he stops in the decrepit seaport of Innsmouth only as a cheap rest, but finds himself interacting with strange people and observing disturbing events that ultimately lead to horrifying personal revelations, resulting in madness. And lastly, his Call of Cthulhu is about protagonist Francis Wayland, who discovers the notes left behind by his deceased great-uncle detailing a cult worshipping Cthulhu. And as he tries to find out why it fascinated his great-uncle so much, he begins to uncover and piece together the dread implications of the reality of the cult. He ends up becoming a possible target, as it turns out the cult is still very much alive. His stories all contain a philosophy named cosmicism, which generally is the belief that there is no recognizable divine presence, such as God, in the universe, and that humans are particularly insignificant in the larger scheme of intergalactic existence. This view of his takes heavy inspiration from nihilism, where all religious and moral principles are rejected in the belief that life as we know it is meaningless. Atheism as well, where the belief of God is null and there's no afterlife. And most importantly, existentialism, which states that humanity is insignificant and we aren't destined for pleasure. It emphasizes individual existence, freedom, and responsibility for determining their own meaning in life, as well as making rational decisions despite existing in an irrational universe. Just like the protagonists in Lovecraft's stories, who also exist in an irrational universe, devoid of God, where nothing seems to have any meaning, and there are clear signs of our insignificance in the grander scheme of things. What sets his cosmic horror apart from just being influences of philosophy is his inclusion of unfathomable concepts and horrors that drive people to madness as they try to grasp it and create meaning. The cosmic horror style has been adapted by many writers since Lovecraft, and was highly encouraged by himself to be used in the works of others, including his actual mythologies and objects of importance. This shared universe between his works is known as the Cthulhu mythos. Elements of this mythos has been borrowed, referenced, and paid tribute to in a ton of works, from video games to books to movies to music. Some notable examples of use of this Lovecraftian horror can be found in popular movies like Alien from 1979 about an unknown horror stalking the crew of a derelict spacecraft in a distant future, or The Thing from 1982, where researchers in the remote Antarctic dig up the remains of an ancient alien life form that thaws and infects the living. These movies are using the Lovecraftian style in more thematic ways, where the protagonists or viewer/reader is shown very little of the horror, never giving them the full picture and creating a more effective type of suspense by fear of the unknown. Other types of media have implemented the style into visuals as well. The smash hit video game series, The Elder Scrolls, featured a demonic entity known as Hermaeus Mora, displayed like a black void shifting eternally with numerous eyes floating within, and dark tentacle-shaped shadows protruding the silhouette. Within his nightmare realm, he dwells between endless corridors filled with bookcases of forbidden knowledge that would make the average man succumb to madness. Another example is the Sony exclusive hit, Bloodborne from 2015, which in terms of visuals speaks highly for itself. Take a look. The best way to get to know H.P. Lovecraft and his cosmic horror is through first-hand experience. So instead of watching any more about him, what you should really do is check out his works or those of the ones he inspired. That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die.